Steelers Nation, when the conversation turns to Mike Tomlin, you can feel the temperature rise in every corner of this fan base. On one side, there's the loyalty to the coach who has kept Pittsburgh among the most stable franchises in the NFL. On the other, the frustration built up over a decade of hitting the same competitive ceiling. And while the national media insists on calling the fan base spoiled or ridiculous, as if we haven't been watching the same cycle repeat year after year, the truth is, this conversation has never been more serious. Because now, it's no longer about firing him, something names like Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter have made clear is not happening. They repeat it over and over, Art Rooney is not firing Mike Tomlin. The only way he wouldn't be coaching the Steelers next season is if he chose to walk away himself. But today, the debate has shifted. It's something else entirely, something far more real, far hotter. Today, Pittsburgh is talking about the possibility of trading Mike Tomlin. So if you bleed black and gold, hit that like button right now because this video is for you. Let's get into it. And this is where fans suddenly have the national guy's attention. They're finally acknowledging what we already know. The league respects Tomlin more today than ever. If he hit the open market, he'd have a job before he even stepped off the plane. That's exactly why the idea of a Tomlin trade isn't just some fan fantasy, it's a legitimate, league-backed conversation. And while the media might find it absurd that fans are even entertaining change, they're the very ones outlining why a trade might actually make sense for both sides. Still, the tone they take, especially from people like Rex Ryan, lands like a slap in the face. Steelers fans aren't asking for chaos. They're asking for excellence. This franchise wasn't built on being good enough. It was built on being the standard. But for the last decade, the standard hasn't meant Super Bowls. It has meant 9 wins, 10 wins, first-round exits, and the same rinse-and-repeat flaws that never seem to get corrected. Even former players see it. When James Harrison says he's lost hope, when he talks about this team being statistically the worst Steelers defense in franchise history, that carries weight. That's not a national commentator who watches 2 drives a year. That's a man who lived Tomlin's system at its peak and knows what it's supposed to look like. And whether anyone wants to admit it or not, the stability that Tomlin provides has come with a steep price, a decline in true competitive excellence, poor game management, poor coordinator hires, a whiff on the Kenny Pickett pick, a roster strategy that leans too heavily on aging defensive stars while the rest of the league pours resources into offense. You could survive that for a season, maybe 2, but for a decade, that's how you end up stuck in the NFL's middle lane, never terrible, never great, always almost. That's exactly why this conversation around a potential trade is gaining life, because for the first time there's a sense that Tomlin himself might be open to the idea of a new chapter. Diana Rossini says he's tired, not done with football, but tired. And Josina Anderson's report about a long-tenured head coach quietly telling teams he may want out feels like more than coincidence given Tomlin's contract situation and the growing tension between performance and expectations in Pittsburgh. Add to that the very real value Tomlin would command on the market, potentially even more than the Saints received for Sean Payton, and suddenly this becomes a conversation the Steelers can't just brush aside. But before any of that can even be entertained, here's the fundamental question for Steelers fans, and it's one I want you to think about carefully before we head into the second part of this story. Given everything happening around the franchise right now, and given the possibility, however small, that Tomlin himself might welcome a fresh start somewhere else, do you believe the Pittsburgh Steelers should seriously consider trading Mike Tomlin if the opportunity presents itself? And if the organization actually allowed itself to explore that possibility, the ripple effects would reshape the entire trajectory of this franchise for the next decade. Because once you accept the idea that Mike Tomlin could be moved, not fired, not forced out, but traded, you immediately step into a world where the Steelers, for the first time in modern history, could leverage their head coach the same way other teams leverage elite quarterbacks or elite pass rushers. And the return could be franchise-altering. Think about what the Saints got for Sean Payton, a coach with a resume that doesn't quite match Tomlin's longevity or his consecutive non-losing seasons. A first and a second. And that was for a coach coming out of retirement. Now imagine what the league's most stable, most respected, most sought-after active head coach could fetch if multiple teams entered a bidding war, something insiders insist would happen. A premium draft pick swap, additional high-round picks, a shot at a franchise quarterback, a chance to jumpstart the rebuild that so many fans feel has been delayed for too long under the Band-Aid approach Pittsburgh has leaned on in recent seasons. And here's where the whispers get much louder. If Tomlin were ever to approve a trade, and remember, he has a no-trade clause, the Giants and the Titans appear to be the 2 landing spots insiders keep circling. Both have young quarterbacks on rookie deals. Both have foundational pieces already in place. Both would view Tomlin as the stabilizing force their franchise needs. And both have the capital to make a deal happen. For the Giants, the allure is obvious. A historic franchise, a massive market, and a promising young roster with Malik Neighbors, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Andrew Thomas, and a rookie contract quarterback in Jackson Dart. From Pittsburgh's perspective, the real prize would be the pick swap, jumping from the middle of the first round into the top 2, securing a shot at one of the top quarterback prospects without mortgaging the future. That alone could change everything. Meanwhile, the Titans, holding the number 1 overall pick and loaded with future capital, offer a different kind of opportunity, less immediate roster stability but more long-term control. For Tomlin, Tennessee presents a fresh canvas. For the Steelers, it presents the chance to secure a premium future first-rounder in a season where a new coach and young roster might still be finding their identity. And that 2027 first could easily become a top 10 selection. But before anyone gets carried away with the mechanics of it all, there's another layer that can't be ignored. The emotional one. Because even if this front office knows a trade could benefit the franchise long term, they also know who Mike Tomlin is inside that locker room. They know the players are loyal to him. They know they'll fight for him until the very last snap of the season. And that makes any decision complicated, because when your locker room respects your coach this deeply, you're not just trading a man. You're trading a leadership culture. You're trading the heartbeat of how the team prepares and competes Monday through Saturday. Still, as this season unfolds and the pressure tightens, the reality is unavoidable. The Steelers are staring at a crossroads they haven't faced in half a century. And whether the national media wants to acknowledge it or not, the fan frustration that has fueled these conversations isn't rooted in hate. It's rooted in love. Love for a franchise whose standards are built on championships, not playoff berths. Love for the history that demands excellence, not survival. Love for the idea that the black and gold should always push for something greater than good enough. And that's why this discussion isn't going away. Not from fans, not from insiders, not from the league, not from ownership, because the question isn't just whether Tomlin wants a change. It's whether the Steelers are finally ready to choose excellence over comfort, boldness over familiarity, and a true reset over another year of hoping things magically shift. So now the question becomes yours. If you had to decide right now, given everything we've broken down, every rumor, every insider report, every sign pointing toward possible change, would you trade Mike Tomlin to accelerate a new era for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And if so, which deal would you take? The Giants' top 2 pick swap for a new quarterback? Or the Titans' long game bet with a future first-rounder that could become gold? Stepping deeper into this crossroads moment, you start to feel just how unprecedented this situation truly is. The Steelers have never operated from a place where the head coach himself is an asset to be moved, an asset who could immediately reshape not only the depth chart, not only the front office's draft board, but the entire direction of the franchise for the next 10 to 15 years. And yet here we are, staring at that possibility with more legitimacy than at any point in the Tomlin era. What makes this moment even more striking is how the franchise's internal identity has slowly shifted without anyone wanting to admit it out loud. For years, stability has been mistaken for success. Consistency has been mistaken for progress. And a floor kept artificially high by Tomlin's leadership has hidden the cracks that have widened beneath it. Because when you spend year after year simply trying to squeeze 9 wins out of an imbalanced roster, you stop building toward a championship. You start building to survive. And that's exactly why the front office now has to ask itself a brutally honest question. Is survival still the mission? Or has survival become the very thing holding this organization back? When you listen to former players, guys like James Harrison who lived through the true standard, you hear the urgency in their voices. You hear the frustration from someone who once stood on a field where excellence wasn't something you hoped for, it was something you enforced. And his message comes through loud and clear. The Steelers are not built to stay in the middle forever. They either rise or they fall. And mediocrity, disguised as stability, is the one thing this franchise has never been designed to tolerate. This is where the potential for a Tomlin trade becomes more than just speculation. It becomes a philosophical pivot point, because the moment you consider trading him, you signal something deeper, a willingness to redefine what the standard actually means moving forward, a willingness to prioritize the future over comfort, a willingness to face the reality that Band-Aids, whether veteran signings, short-term pass rush fixes, temporary quarterback stopgaps, or patchwork coordinators, cannot carry this team into the next era of NFL football. You need foundational pieces. You need a franchise quarterback. You need a staff built with a long-term vision. You need a roster that can develop instead of constantly compensating. And that's why the rumored Giants and Titans scenarios feel so consequential. The Giants offer immediate trajectory change, a quarterback window, elite young talent, and draft position that could alter the next decade overnight. The Titans offer long-term leverage, a potential future top-tier first-round pick, a young quarterback, and a blank slate for a new identity under a new coaching era. Either path is bold, either path is risky, but staying exactly where Pittsburgh has been, stuck on a treadmill with no incline, is the riskiest path of all. As this tension builds, the organization isn't just weighing its future, it's weighing its identity. Are the Steelers still the team that defines the standard of excellence in the NFL? Or have they become the team that simply upholds the illusion of one? If this truly is the moment where Tomlin is open to something different, and ownership is forced to make a decision they've avoided for nearly 6 decades, then whatever happens next won't just shape the roster. It will redefine what it means to wear the black and gold. And now it's your turn again. Your voice as a fan has driven this conversation further than the national media expected, and it's only becoming louder. If this franchise truly wants to chase excellence instead of comfort, what move should they make? Should the Steelers embrace the boldness of a Tomlin trade if the opportunity is real? Giants package or Titans package? What path sets Pittsburgh on the road back to true championship contention? Let me know in the comments what direction you believe the Steelers must take from here. And before you head out, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the videos on screen for more deep dive analysis on everything happening inside Steelers Nation. And as this conversation reaches its peak, you can feel how much weight it carries, not just for the fans, not just for the front office, but for the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers themselves. Because once a franchise even entertains the idea of moving a head coach this established, this respected, this deeply woven into the culture, it forces everyone involved to confront a truth they've avoided for years. The future cannot look like the past. Not if the goal is to get back to lifting Lombardies instead of simply surviving seasons. It's why these discussions suddenly feel so different. For the first time, every side of the equation, fans, national analysts, former players, the locker room, even the coach himself, appears to understand that the friction isn't manufactured. It's real, it's systemic, and it's no longer fixable with one coordinator hire, one draft class, or one veteran signing. The issues run deeper. They're philosophical, they're structural, they're tied to a decade of treading water, hoping that experience and stability alone would eventually be enough to push this team over the edge. Instead, that stability became the very thing preventing change. And that's why these trade scenarios matter beyond the rumors themselves. They represent a rare moment where the Steelers could reshape their future by acting, not reacting. Imagine the franchise stepping into the offseason with a top 2 pick, a path to selecting its next franchise quarterback, and a young core ready to grow alongside a new vision. Or picture the franchise securing a future first-rounder that could position them to own not just this draft, but the next one as well, setting up a multi-year window to rebuild the right way, with patience and purpose instead of desperation and duct tape. Those options don't come around often, and they certainly don't come around for a team that almost never makes drastic moves. But here's the twist in all of this. The Steelers wouldn't be acting out of anger or failure. They'd be acting from a place of clarity, recognizing that both sides, Tomlin and the franchise, might actually benefit from a fresh start. Tomlin would get the change of scenery insiders believe he may want. Pittsburgh would get the resources it desperately needs to reset the foundation. And for the first time in years, the franchise could align its roster, coaching staff, and long-term vision instead of trying to force a win-now identity onto a team that simply isn't built for it. Still, the emotional weight is undeniable. This is a coach whose players adore him, whose leadership is unquestioned, whose legacy is carved into the fabric of modern Steelers football. Moving on from that, even through a trade, even for massive return, would be seismic. It would shake the locker room. It would shake the city. It would shake the league. And yet, sometimes the most iconic organizations earn their greatness by embracing moments exactly like this, moments where bold decisions rewrite the trajectory of a decade. So here's where the fan base comes in, because this decision, if it ever becomes real, won't happen in a vacuum. Ownership hears the noise. The locker room hears it. The league hears it. The national media certainly hears it. And the louder this discussion becomes, the more it forces the franchise to confront the choice in front of them: stay on the same track and hope experience eventually turns into excellence, or make a move so significant it changes the identity of the Steelers for a generation. And now, as this potential future hangs in the balance, the question becomes even bigger. If Mike Tomlin genuinely gave the Steelers the green light to explore a trade, do you believe this franchise would have the courage to make that call? And if that moment ever truly came, if Mike Tomlin himself walked into Art Rooney's office and said he was open to a change, everything the Steelers have been for the last 17 years would hang in the balance. because that wouldn't just be an organizational decision. That would be a generational one. A decision that reverberates through draft rooms, locker rooms, living rooms across Pittsburgh, and deep into the identity of a franchise that has always defined itself by loyalty, stability, and patience. And yet, even the most loyal franchises eventually face their crossroads. Even the most stable organizations must decide whether they are preserving greatness or preserving comfort. What makes this such a defining moment is that the Steelers are not trying to escape dysfunction, they're trying to recapture excellence. Most teams trade coaches out of desperation. Pittsburgh would be trading one because the value of doing so might actually set them on a better long-term path than staying the course. That's the irony the national media keeps missing. They treat this conversation as if fans want a circus. But what fans actually want is to stop living in the gray zone between success and stagnation. They want boldness again. They want vision again. They want a team that enters a season with realistic championship expectations, not as a hopeful wild card team praying for a miracle run. And that's exactly why the trade possibilities feel so enticing. Imagine stepping into next season with a franchise quarterback chosen at the very top of the draft instead of settling for mid-tier prospects or reclamation projects. Imagine pairing that quarterback with a fresh coaching staff allowed to build a system from the ground up instead of squeezing innovation into a structure that hasn't evolved in years. Imagine a defense rebuilt with youth and speed instead of relying on aging stars to do all the heavy lifting. Imagine a roster finally aligned toward the future instead of patched together for the present. That's what a Tomlin trade could unlock. Not because Tomlin isn't good enough, but because the franchise needs more than good. It needs transformational pieces. It needs the kind of assets that change the next decade, not the next drive. And that's also why the destination matters. A deal with the Giants means Pittsburgh suddenly has access to elite quarterback talent at the very top of the draft. A deal with the Titans gives them long-term capital that could define their roster for years. Both paths lead toward something the Steelers haven't had in a long time. Options. Real options. Strategic options. Championship-level options. But let's be clear, none of this happens without acknowledging the emotional cost. Tomlin isn't just a coach, he's a pillar. A leader players swear by. Someone whose presence holds real weight in the building. Trading him wouldn't be clean. It wouldn't be painless. It wouldn't be universally celebrated. It would fracture the fan base. It would stun the locker room. It would dominate the national conversation for weeks. But that's exactly the kind of disruption that often marks the beginning of a new era. The Patriots had theirs. The Chiefs had theirs. The Eagles had theirs. And each time, those choices propelled them into new windows of contention. So if the Steelers ultimately decide to take that leap, if they choose the path of boldness over comfort, future over familiarity, long-term growth over short-term stability, they won't be doing it out of disrespect for Mike Tomlin. They'll be doing it because sometimes the greatest respect you can show a franchise legend is recognizing when the relationship has run its natural course. Because sometimes the best way to honor the past is to secure the future. And now, with all the context laid out, with every angle analyzed, with every possibility on the table, the final question for you, the heartbeat of Steelers Nation, is this. If Tomlin truly opened the door for a trade, do you believe the